Welcome back to InfoWars Nightly News. I'm your host, Rob Dew. Aaron did the news part and had a couple interviews there and did a great job. And now we've got a special guest in here, Mike Adams, the health ranger, who just did the radio show this morning. And we learned a lot of new things. We learned from Mark Potok from the Southern Poverty Law Center that there is no hate speech. Just never existed, even though that's what they use to go after people all the time. And also he covered a story that I want to get into real quick. And it's about this man, Andrew Werdus, who was in Roswell, Georgia, and the man ended up committing suicide over the fact that his house was going to be foreclosed on. The city was coming after him for all these ridiculous code violations. They wouldn't give him any assistance, not doing what a city servant is supposed to do, but acting like a bureaucratic official. So with that, we're going to turn to Mike Adams, the health ranger. How you doing, sir?
Hey, Rob. Good to join you, man.
Yeah.
A lot going on.
A lot going on. So let's get right into the city of Roswell incident. Tell us a little bit about what happened.
Well, first of all, Andrew Werdus is dead. He set his house on fire with himself inside the house. He was driven to that by a total outrageous abuse of power of the local bureaucrats there in Roswell, Georgia, who violated all kinds of laws and his civil rights in many different ways to intimidate him and try to take his property. They even contacted the holder of his mortgage illegally and tried to get them to sell his mortgage, which they did. They sold it out from under him to a mysterious owner that we have not been able to identify who now owns his mortgage.
Definitely not related to anyone in the city, I'm sure.
Of course not.
Yeah.
Of course not.
Not
Only in Austin does that happen.
Right, right. And we actually have a timeline of these events. Let's roll that timeline real quick, and you could just kind of go over it. And I mean, it's really, it's a sad situation. Here's a guy raising chickens.
A backyard chicken farmer, a car mechanic. This began several years ago. This has been going on, from December 2008. You can see there's our Friday Fright Night city code enforcer there on the
Vicky the Hut Barclay.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Anyway, this goes on. There were some people in the city who tried to help him out. Others
the
said
mayor
no.
seemed to want to help him out.
The mayor tried to help him. They changed the rules on him to try to criminalize his backyard chickens after the fact without allowing him to be grandfathered in. They caused his property to be flooded because they refused to maintain a culvert that then flooded his property. Then they condemned his property, and they had it declared a nuisance property because he had what they called dead organic matter on the property. Well, that's just compost.
Yeah.
That's like, I compost on my property, I take chicken scraps, I put them out there, kitchen scraps, excuse me,
right.
Because I have chickens too. I take chicken scraps, that would be bad. Yeah. I take kitchen scraps and put them outside to make the compost, and I also take care of chickens. I have goats. Do goats poop on the property? Yes, of course they do, but in Roswell, Georgia, they call that a nuisance, and they use that as a reason to put him in jail for code violations.
And then from there, they foreclosed on his house. They took it over. And then I guess in the Inn incident, which happened just late last month, they came to evict him, and he blew the house up.
Well, there were some other things that happened, too. When they threw him in jail for 99 days for the code violations that they claimed, they then announced in the local paper that we threw this guy in jail. Well, everybody in town knew that Andrew owned firearms and mechanics tools and other valuable items, so his house was then looted. And the city said, we'll send some police officers over there to take a look, but they didn't really protect him. His house was looted. By the time he got out of jail, he came back and he found that his guns were stolen, his auto tools were stolen, some of his farm tools were stolen, his chickens had been poisoned, his house had been vandalized or looted. This was part of what led to his taking his own life.
Demonization effort is what it sounds like. This guy.
The city, I believe, engaged in a criminal conspiracy to destroy this man's life, and they succeeded.
They did. And what are they going to do with that property? They're probably going to sell it to one of their developer friends, or that's what they do in Austin. They get this stuff, they kick people out of it, say it's no humans on it. Oh, but now we're going to put a high-rise on it or an apartment complex. It's magic.
Well, that property appears on the city's map of what they want as a future green zone. Now, by the time people see this and go to the website, the city may cleverly change that map to try to say, no, it wasn't. But we've done the research, and it is in the green zone map.
Well, let's go to a couple of these, well, at least one of the code enforcement officials, as she likes to call herself, or she's the supervisor, Vicky Barclay. Let's get the overhead shot of this. We also have a graphic. But what I find funny is on their website, it says, the Code Enforcement Office works each and every day to ensure that Roswell remains safe and a desirable place to live and do business for all our residents and visitors. blah, blah, blah. They do this through a fair and unbiased enforcement program, which corrects violations of Roswell City Code or writes new ones if we don't have a code that actually fits what we don't like that you're doing.
It seems clear that this woman, Vicky Barkley, is in the center of what I'm calling a conspiracy to intimidate, oppress, and destroy this man's life. They would selectively enforce code violations against him, but not others who exhibited the same behavior on their property. When a flood occurred, because the city failed to maintain their culverts, the flood eroded part of his property, so he brought in a bobcat to help repair and restore the soil.
Who gave him the bobcat?
I think it was the mayor.
It was the mayor.
Yeah, loaned him the bobcat.
You have the mayor who's on this guy's side, who's trying to help him out, which it's usually like that in these small town situations.
Right.
You have the mayor who's a normal, decent guy, and then this council of vultures and other little petty bureaucrats.
Creatures.
Here's another skexy, KJ Love, who was, she was a city administrator who was help kind of change the law so he couldn't have the chickens anymore, so they could rewrite that law.
That's right. It appears that the law was specifically rewritten to target this one individual and put him in a state of violation that they could then use to escalate the situation, which ultimately led to his death.
This is the poison fruits right here of Agenda 21. These people think they now have free reign to go in and just intimidate people and write new laws and kick people out when they find a piece of land that they want, and it's despicable. Right.
It's absolutely despicable, and it saddens me in particular, Rob, because I believe that had we known about this man and what was happening, either at InfoWars or where I'm the editor of National News, we could have publicized this and prevented this man from dying.
Yeah.
InfoWars has saved many lives by shedding light on bureaucrats and tyrants who are threatening innocent people. And I believe that this man's life being lost could have been prevented had we known in time and had we been able to take action in time and exposed the criminal conspiracy that I believe was taking place by these city administrators.
Well, all we can do now is may his death not be in vain.
Exactly.
Andrew Wordis. We can, get the word out, tell other people. Maybe somebody who's going through the same thing now is going to see this and go, man, I need to reach out. I need to do something, I'm going to put myself out on YouTube and expose these people, because when you shine light on these cockroaches, they'll run for cover because they're in the wrong and they know they're in the wrong. That's why they're doing it with all this color of law stuff.
They are counting on these individuals to not have the resources to be able to bring in national attention.
Right.
And
they love the single old people. That's their favorite victim to go after. That's their prey. They see that and they go, oh, we can get that. That's going to be easy. He won't put up a fight, or she won't put up a fight, and they love to go after veterans because they've done their duty and served their country.
Especially veterans.
And I mean, it's really sick. There's an article, it's on InfoWars, but it's also at Natural News. City of Roswell, Georgia, bullies Andrew Words to death over his backyard chickens. And you covered a story today about, they want to come after and kill people's pigs in Michigan.
Well, yes, and there's a case, Mark Baker is the farmer there, who put out a YouTube video and took a stand, and he's alive today because of that. They were going to raid his farm on April 1 with firearms and shoot and slaughter his entire livestock, and maybe even shoot him if he put up resistance. But they backed off. Why? Because attention was brought to this case from the Farm to Consumer Legal Defense Fund. We covered it at Natural News. It's been covered elsewhere. Alex Jones covered it on his show like 10 days ago or so. The light saves lives.
Yeah.
So I just want you to remember this too, Rob, that what you do here every day, I know you work hard, man, and I know it can be stressful, but I want you to remember that at the end of the day, you are literally helping save lives from the tyrants by shedding light on the truth here of what's happening.
Well, and that's what makes it worth it, and I'm happy to do it because I hate injustice, and I hate when bullies pick on the underdog.
Absolutely.
And, I wasn't raised that way to take advantage of people, and I hate to see it happen, and it really, really pisses me off.
Well, me too. And just to add, I raise backyard chickens. All right, I've got goats. Yeah, clearly, right? Some kind of weird terrorist. If they can do this to him, they could do it to me.
You're next.
They could do it to you or your family. Anybody around Austin, anybody in Texas who's a farmer, they could just declare your property to be a nuisance zone, and they could come literally shoot your livestock and arrest you or even shoot you.
And what gets me is these people are not producers. They're not makers of things. They are these petty little tattletale miscreants. It reminds me of the people when you were in school who were writing names on the board. They were the first one to stand up and go, oh, I'll write your name on the board.
Right.
I'm good. I'm with the system.
Nazi enforcers.
Oh, it's sick. Let's move on to one of our favorite whipping boys, Monsanto, who's going to sue the entire state of Vermont just because, well, they want to have a right-to-know genetically engineered food act, and that's what it's H722. And they're going, apparently Monsanto is threatening to sue the state of Vermont. What can you tell us on this?
Well, Monsanto is losing this war so badly about the right to know what's in your food that state after state has been putting forth legislation that would allow parents and consumers, all of us, to just know what's in our food, to be able to make an informed decision about whether we want to buy GMO food or non-GMO food. Monsanto sees that as the end of their entire GMO business, which is probably an accurate assessment. So they're in desperation mode now, threatening and intimidating an entire state in this case, and California is probably going to be next because there's a petition effort there to label GMOs. They're trying to intimidate the entire state into saying that if you dare allow this law to be put into action and allow consumers to be informed of what's in their food, then we're going to drag your state through the courts and cost you hundreds of millions of dollars in court fees, and your state can't afford that. So this is another case of corporate bullying of a state that's trying to simply allow its consumers to be informed.
Now, could a state like Vermont say, you know what, we're not going to allow Monsanto products in our state? Could they ban those products?
Absolutely, they could.
Just say, you know, no weed killer, no Roundup. We don't want this crap in here, and we're going to blockade you, like the Trade Federation and Star Wars, if you don't, you know, capitulate.
But the federal government would then probably intervene, and they would misquote the Commerce Clause of the Constitution.
Oh, of course.
And actually, the original intent of the Commerce Clause was to make sure that states could not erect illegal tariffs against interstate trade. So that might actually be one of the only appropriate uses if it were in a different context. But you can bet the federal government would cite the Commerce Clause to try to intervene and allow Monsanto to keep selling its products in the state.
And, you know, that, after listening to what I just said, that might sound like a call, you know, for like tyranny of the state. But, you know, the states are allowed to assert their rights. And if they're being sued by these companies, that the research is out there. This stuff is not good for us. It's not. And they hide the research. They try to hide anything that lets people know and make an informed choice.
Well, think about this. GMOs are the only product that I can think of that is only successfully sold because consumers don't know they're buying it.
That's it.
It is sold entirely on deception, disinformation, and sweeping it under the rug, so to speak. If foods were honestly and accurately labeled with their GMO content, 95% of consumers would avoid buying them.
Right.
And that would be the end of the GMO industry, which is what we need.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we don't need these companies preying on us anymore with and it's not even that the GMOs are any better. They're not. They take more pesticide, which is just poisoning us more, or they have all these reproductive problems, which is most likely intentional.
Sure. Well, Monsanto is a lot like Obama, where Monsanto made a lot of campaign promises just like Obama made and then violated every single one of them. Well, Monsanto's so-called campaign promises were that these seeds would increase production, you would have to use less pesticide, you know, increase yields, better nutrition, and so on. The opposite has been the case. So just as Obama has said, let's have more secret prisons, let's sign the NDAA, let's raid medical marijuana clinics in California.
Let's take over farms if we want.
Exactly. Monsanto, the facts have turned out that the crop yields are lower, the soil is killed off and dead, crops cannot even grow very well after 5 years, the super weeds are taking over, you have to use more pesticides, more chemicals, which is killing the rivers and the streams downstream. It's a freaking ecological nightmare. Yeah, of course. It cross-pollinates, it ruins the genetic code of the agricultural industry in America. We're talking about a genetic assault on the future of America's agriculture.
It's happening now. It's definitely happening now, and now it's coming after, and it's killing the bees. I mean, that's they're finally, after many years of probably lackluster study, they're finally saying, well, you know what, it is chlorothalonide. How do you say that again?
Well, it's in a class called neonicotinoids. Neonicotinoids is the class, and that's just one example, one chemical in that class of chemical pesticides.
Bayer.
Yep, by Bayer. Oh, a loving Bayer.
Yeah, who sold tainted HIV blood to the rest of the world that they exported here from the United States.
Former chairperson of Bayer served time in prison after the Nuremberg trials for war crimes. That's a piece of history that people don't really tend to acknowledge, but that's part of Bayer's history as well.
And so how is it actually killing the bees? What is it doing to them? Is it getting them to where they're not knowing where their colony is, or?
Definitely. Understand, these synthetic chemicals, these are designed to attack the nervous systems of insects. That's their killing mechanism. When the honeybees are exposed to them, which is usually at low concentrations, low levels, it doesn't necessarily kill the honeybees. What it does is it disrupts their normal neurological function, which is a very complex, fragile system of navigation that actually tunes in to many environmental cues, sunlight, the angle of the sun, maybe even the Earth's magnetic fields. We don't even know if that's part of it as well. But it's a very delicate computer that's in the honeybees' little brains. And when that computer is disrupted by these chemicals, then it throws off their navigation. They can't find their way back to the flower. They can't even find their way back to the hive. They get lost. They die. The colony collapses, and then the food supply begins to collapse. That's what we're facing now as the honeybees collapse.
Yeah, I shot this a couple years ago on the Greenbelt. Go back to that footage, and it's a honeybee I was touching it. I was trying to get it to move. It was just
Lost.
Not interested in doing anything but laying there.
Well, think about it. If the honeybees get lost, the human species may be lost because our food supply ends.
We can't pollinate. That's one thing we can't do.
We
can try, but
there are, greenhouse owners who do it all by hand.
Right.
Talk about a labor-intensive business. The honeybees, they work for us for free.
Yeah.
You can't replace that.
There was a cost at one time. How much was that where they said, this is how much it would cost to do what the honeybees are doing for nothing?
Probably hundreds of billions of dollars a year globally. There are honeybee owners who will rent out their hives, for pollination. That's been a traditional activity that you see in agriculture. But now I've seen some American farmers have to bring in bees from places like Australia because that's where the colonies aren't yet collapsing. So that, you can imagine how hugely expensive that is to airship honeybees from another continent to pollinate your food in America.
Bees on a plane. Very interesting.
Yeah, right.
Well, let's move on to, SSRIs. They're, we had just had in Austin, a 24-year-old Brandon Daniel was on Xanax and tequila and went to Home Depot it was Walmart and killed a cop.
Yeah.
And it's just one of the many things that happens with these people taking on these SSRIs. And this is a very growing trend. We got the active duty troops on them. We had the guy who went on the Afghan murder spree. Now he was being put on was this an amnesic drug he was on?
Yeah, he was on a combination.
Okay.
They do painkillers, they do sleep drugs, they do the memory hole drugs that they put soldiers on so they don't remember the trauma that they went through. Instead of treating it, just cover it up.
Right.
You remember comedian Phil Hartman? He used to be on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah.
He was a victim of a murder-suicide.
On this?
She was on the antidepressant drugs. Yeah.
Wow.
You go back to Columbine High School shootings. Obviously, the antidepressants, the SSRIs in that case. You got to look.
90% of the shooters, I think.
Oh yeah, it's a huge number. And we have an epidemic of the psychiatric drugging of U.S. soldiers, as this graphic is showing. This is one that we put together. And
these are really good. I like these graphics.
Thanks, man. We're just trying to keep up with InfoWars. There we go. Look at what it causes: suicides, accidents, violence, and drug addiction. The soldiers are given a 180-day supply of all these psychotropic drugs and then sent out into the field with all these drugs in their hands. And they barter them, they trade them, they take too much, they lose them, they have withdrawals. The most dangerous thing that you can do with these drugs is quit them cold turkey.
Right.
That's what causes a violent outbreak episode. So for anyone watching who wants to get off of these drugs, make sure you work with your physician or naturopath. Do it slowly, gradually over time. Don't quit cold turkey or you may just snap and end up shooting somebody or shooting your own family member, because these drugs cause you to dissociate from reality. So that young man who shot a police officer in Austin, he may not have even known what he was doing. He may have thought in his mind that he was playing a video game, an Xbox game, that involved a Walmart and some bad guys with guns, and he just thought he was playing a game. And later, he might have realized what actually happened, but at that moment in his mind, he may not at all have been guilty of pulling that trigger and committing that crime.
God, I mean, it's just, and this is all these are examples of the system and the lordships above us trying to come out with these panaceas. It's like, oh, here, just take this, just do this. We're going to help you. All this is here to help you, and it's not. It's always these so-called good intentions, which are usually motivated by profits and stealing from people.
This is clearly motivated by profit, the psych drugging of soldiers and children and adults in America. Yeah. And the real sad part about it, Rob, is that the scientific studies show that these antidepressants work no better than placebo. So there's absolutely no benefit to them. compared to just taking a sugar pill, let's say, or an olive oil pill. So the scientific fraud that pushes the pills, and then there's profit fraud that takes place, and then the damage that the pills cause, such as the shooting of this police officer in Austin. Who pays for that? Does the drug company pay for that? No.
No,
of course not.
They're never at fault at all for creating this stuff. Just like the vaccines, they can't be at fault for giving kids autism. I was looking, actually had my mom send me these pictures, and I didn't bring in my phone with me, but from this edition of National Geographic, they had a study with twins. And there's a graph for identical and fraternal twins, and identical twins are more susceptible. If one gets autism, the other one is more likely to get it too. And my wife brought this up because we're always having the vaccine debate at my house.
Oh, really?
Let me tell you.
Must be fun.
And I fight it. I fight it very hardcore. And she came up and showed me this. She goes, well, what does this mean? How come the fraternal twins don't get it? And I said, well, you know, identical twins come from the same genetic makeup, you know, the same egg. And whereas you got fraternal twins, it's two different eggs. So you have two different genetic makeups. So they're not as susceptible. Whereas, you know, if you look across the board, the identical twins are more susceptible to alcoholism if one has the other get it, learning disabilities, autism. And that's just because they come from the same genetic makeup. So they're probably getting the same other environmental factors that would trigger that.
Yeah, absolutely. That's true. There is some genetic susceptibility to the causes of autism, which most undoubtedly include vaccine adjuvants, the chemicals. But Alex actually hit on something huge the other day that I don't think has even been highlighted enough, which is that there's a whole new wave of vaccines that aren't even vaccines. They're not working on the antibody theory of immune response. They are, in fact, nanotechnology brain-eating injections. They're chemical lobotomies, but they call them vaccines.
Right.
So autism may be just the earliest example in our society of an injection with a chemical that eats part of your brain or disables part of your neurology.
Sure.
And in the future, they're going to target adults like you and me.
Sure.
People who speak out, oh, you have a disorder.
People who think about conspiracies, yeah, you probably have a disorder.
Clearly. Well, they have it named. It's obedience defiance disorder, ODD. That's already in the DSM of the psychiatric manual.
Oh, yeah. Restless leg syndrome.
Right.
Need a vaccine. You know, there's always going to be something to treat people. Mike, it's always a pleasure to have you in here. Thanks a lot for coming, and I'm sure you'll be back many more times. And it's great having you here in Texas and fighting the fight with us and milking your Nigerian goats.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me on, Rob. All right. Rights in many different ways to intimidate him and try to take his property. They even contacted the holder of his mortgage illegally and tried to get them to sell his mortgage, which they did. They sold it out from under him to a mysterious owner that we have not been able to identify who now owns his mortgage.
Definitely not related to anyone in the city, I'm sure.
Of course not.
Yeah.
Of course not.
Not
Only in Austin does that happen.
Right, right. And we actually have a timeline of these events. Let's roll that timeline real quick, and you could just kind of go over it. And I mean, it's it's a sad situation. Here's a guy raising chickens.
A backyard chicken farmer, a car mechanic. This began several years ago. This has been going on from December 2008. You can see there's our Friday Fright Night city code enforcer there on
Vicky the Huff.
to make the compost. And I also take care of chickens. I have goats. Do goats poop on the property? Yes, of course they do. But in Roswell, Georgia, they call that a nuisance, and they use that as a reason to put him in jail for code violations. And
then from there, they foreclosed on his house. They took it over. And then I guess in the end incident, which happened just late last month, they came to evict him, and he blew the house up.
Well, there were some other things that happened, too. When they threw him in jail for 99 days for the code violations that they claimed, they then announced in the local paper that we threw this guy in jail. Well, everybody in town knew that Andrew owned firearms and mechanics tools and other valuable items.
Sparkly.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. Anyway, this goes on. There were some people in the city who tried to help him out. Others said no.
The mayor seemed to want to help him out.
The mayor tried to help him. They changed the rules on him to try to criminalize his backyard chickens after the fact without allowing him to be grandfathered in. They caused his property to be flooded because they refused to maintain a culvert that then flooded his property. Then they condemned his property, and they had it declared a nuisance property because he had what they called dead organic matter on the property. Well, that's just compost.
Yeah.
That's like, I compost on my property, I take chicken scraps, I put them out there, kitchen scraps, excuse me, because I have chickens too. I take chicken scraps, that would be bad. Yeah. I take kitchen scraps and put them outside.
Welcome back to InfoWars Nightly News. I'm your host, Rob Dew. Aaron did the news part and had a couple interviews there and did a great job. And now we've got a special guest in here, Mike Adams, the health ranger, who just did the radio show this morning. And we learned a lot of new things. We learned from Mark Potok from the Southern Poverty Law Center that there is no hate speech. Just never existed, even though that's what they use to go after people all the time. And also he covered a story that I want to get into real quick. And it's about this man, Andrew Wurtis, who was in Roswell, Georgia. And the man ended up committing suicide over the fact that his house was going to be foreclosed on. The city was coming after him for all these ridiculous code violations. They wouldn't give him any assistance, not doing what a city servant is supposed to do, but acting like a bureaucratic official. So with that, we're going to turn to Mike Adams, the health ranger. How you doing, sir?
Hey, Rob. Good to join you, man.
Yeah.
A lot going on.
A lot going on. So let's get right into the city of Roswell incident. Tell us a little bit about what happened.
Well, first of all, Andrew Wurtis is dead. He set his house on fire with himself inside the house. He was driven to that by a total outrageous abuse of power of the local bureaucrats there in Roswell, Georgia, who violated all kinds of laws and his civil